more like an interview in a way. There's a set of questions that I'm going to ask Khenpo, and he's going to respond to them. Now that may lead to some conversation at one point or another, but basically that's the plan for this evening. And some of the questions are directly relevant to the book, but because, well, some of you, of course, do know Khenpo, not all of you do. So he's new to some of you here, and so there'll be some questions also that will, I think, help to introduce Khenpo to those of you who may not know him as well as some of his closer students do. So with that, do you want to say anything at this point, or?
Well, not much, but I want to say, everyone, good evening. First of all, I want to say welcome. I want to welcome all of you, and thank you very much for joining this event, and thank you for your support. I'm so honored to be here tonight with Roger, so thank you, Roger, sharing wisdom of your experience here tonight with me. And I also would like to thank the entire team at Shambhala Publications for helping this book be published in such beautiful, beautiful way.
Yep.
I want to thank that from the bottom of my heart. And I think that's all I want to say. And
All right.
we're ready to talk about our book.
All right, we'll take it away. Well, the first question is more of a biographical or autobiographical. We're sort of working our way towards the book. And this is a question that I think particularly people who are, quote, not from here often either ask or receive. And in Khenpola's case, it'll be interesting, I think, to hear the answer to this question. How did you end up in Minnesota?
One of my root teachers sent me to Nepal. Can you hear me? Okay.
Better like that.
Yeah.
Okay, one of my root teachers sent me to Nepal to teach at a monastery in 2000. And I went to Nepal and I was there for 3 years. And at that time, there was a Buddhist school for Western students, and I taught the middle way, which is the part of Buddhist philosophy, to those Westerns. And at that time, Corlando was there, and he's from here, Minnesota. And one time he said that I would like to invite you to come to the United States and to teach Buddhism Westerns, and I would like to, more than happy to translate for you, because at that time I did not speak English at all. I'm still not so good, but then I said, yes, of course, I would like to teach, Buddhism Westerns, and then he brought me here, and that's how I end up here in Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Long way.
Yep.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Khenpo assiduously studied English. He took night classes. He really, really worked on it. It's not easy learning a language like English. I think those of us who know him know how extraordinarily well he has done in learning the language.
Yeah, when I was in Tibet, like I never heard like America, and there's no chance study English. And when I came to Nepal, the monastery, I lived in a monastery and very busy, so there's no time to study English for 3 years. But then came back here and I had a good opportunity to study English, and now hopefully you will understand a little bit, not correct everything, but
Yeah, just before we came down, he and I were talking about the sort of technological changes we've, witnessed in our lifetime. And, of course, I'm old enough to have, remember when computers came in, but I was born into a world of airplanes and cars and things like that. But Khenpo was saying that when he was in Tibet, they had no electricity. They had to study these texts by candlelight. And when he heard of this thing called a bicycle, which the Tibetans, he said, called an iron horse, chatta, that this was sort of mind-blowing to him. So, there's quite a distance that has been traversed here. Anyway, much more could be said, but shifting more towards the book, could you say a little bit about how this book came to be? I know it's been many years in the making.
I entered the Buddhist path at a very early age, and I continued received teachings from my great teachers, and I've been my whole life studying Buddhism. So therefore, I would like to introduce the inner meaning of Buddhism to Western students according to my own experience. Because I think there are so many people who have misunderstanding about Buddhism. Writing the teachings and instructions in ordinary language, I think the best way to help people to understand Buddhism and practice properly. That is kind of main reason why I was motivated to wrote this book. Then another reason is that I want to help people who are not even like a spiritual practitioner and who really don't know how to reduce or eliminate their mental suffering, negative emotions such as anger, jealousy, anxiety, etc. Therefore, if you read this book, you will understand how to let go of your negative emotions and what makes your life meaningful, and it teaches how to bring happiness into your day-to-day life. That's another reason. And then another reason is I would like to also want to help people who want to practice Buddhism, but they're very new to Buddhism, so they really don't know how to start practicing Buddhism. So therefore, in this book, I introduced what Buddhism is and how to investigate it and how to start and how to follow. And then my last, there are many reasons, but these are the main reasons. The last reason is that I also want to help specific people who are practice Buddhism and who really want to practice Tibetan Buddhism and who really want to understand all the stages that they need to take in order to achieve enlightenment. In this book, I explained the oral instructions from great masters and also from my own experience to guide students on their spiritual path. So that's why it's called the Heart of Tibetan Buddhism, Advice for Life, Death, and Enlightenment. So for these reasons that I wrote this book, and I also would like to explain a little bit about the whole book, if you don't mind. I know we don't have much time, but I'll be very quick. This book, many of you know, this book has two parts. One part is about very basic teaching, very basic instructions, which anyone can apply and practice. It's called Enter in the Path of Practice. It has 12 chapters, such as Introduction to the Inner Meaning of Teaching of Buddhism, Introduction to Meditation, Love and Forgiveness, and etc. How to develop human nature and how to value of human life, and how to handle difficult emotions in relationship, and so on and so forth. And then the second, the part 2 is about specific Buddhist teachings. It's called Preparing for Birth, Death, and After Death. It has 3 chapters: how birth and death occur, what will happen after death, how to prepare for time of death. These are according to Buddhist teachings, and I think that's all about this whole book. So I really, my motivation was, as I said, I really hope it will help people who want to practice Buddhism and study Buddhism. So that's the whole thing.
In a nutshell.
Part 1, maybe you are interested. Maybe part 2 is very specific about birth, death, after death. Maybe you're not interested in all that. But it will happen.
Yes, right. Given the likelihood that everyone here will die someday, I think
Sooner
there's
or
probably
later.
more than a little amount of interest. I might just, as an aside, note that in some ways the germ of this book, which I got to work a little bit with Khenpo on, but actually Kate Thomas, who's with us here tonight, was the sort of persistent, consistent editor who helped Khenpo in countless ways to bring this book to fruition, and should be acknowledged here. But in some ways this book began as a book that Khenpo had written in Tibetan for his own students in Tibet, and the process of sort of translating that first into English, but then into English and into concepts and terms that could be understandable to a Western, particularly American, but a Western English-speaking audience. That took a long time. These concepts don't come over so naturally or easily by any means. Anyway, that's just a little bit about that. Going back to your comments on particularly the first part of the book, I mean, the title of the book, The Heart of Tibetan Buddhism, can mean many different things, but it seems to me that, especially in the first part of the book, the heart of the heart is what in Sanskrit is called bodhicitta, which is translated in many ways. It's translated as the mind of awakening, the mind of enlightenment, but often I've heard you and others translate it as something like a kind mind. And I'm wondering if you could talk about why that, whether I'm right that is sort of the heart of Tibetan Buddhism, and if so, why?
Well, yes, as you know, Buddhists believe that all these problems and sufferings that we have in our day-to-day life, that is because of we call it our selfish ego mind. That is the root of all these problems and suffering. So the best solution for that is what we call it bodhicitta, as she said, a kind heart or kind mind. Basically, it means bodhicitta means a kind heart. So whoever has bodhicitta and practice bodhicitta, that person really can handle almost all, I would say, almost all these problems and sufferings that we are every single day go through. And that person also has the ability to get rid of all these negative emotions and problems. It changes our selfish and ego mind, so that we can stop harming each other, and instead, we can help each other and have a good relationships. That is the power of bodhicitta, the heart, what do you call it? Not heart of life, right? The kind of mind. So the purpose of, as many of you know, the purpose of Buddhist teaching is to develop a kind heart. And that's why Buddha said that, in Tibetan, it means taking your own body as an example. Do not bring harm to others. That's Buddha himself said that. So if we develop, that's why, if we develop bodhicitta, the kind of heart in our mind, it will eliminate the selfishness, and it will keep us in harmony with others, and it will help help us to have a good and happy life. So, as many of you know, I usually say that to practice the good heart of bodhicitta, there is really no need to become a Buddhist, because if you practice this kind of heart, bodhicitta, definitely you will have a kind heart. So that's why a kind mind or kind heart is important, and that's why the bodhicitta is the heart of Buddhist practice. So if you read this book, in my book, every single teaching and instructions that I wrote really based on bodhicitta practice, the kind mind. If you read it, you will know it.
And of course, bodhicitta sangha is the name of Khenpo's
Yeah,
spiritual
that's
guru.
this practice.
You can see why now.
It's my favorite thing.
One element of bodhicitta, if we look at Buddhism philosophically, because of course Buddhism is famous for its philosophy, philosophies of various sorts as well. Bodhicitta is sometimes described as having a conventional and an ultimate aspect. The conventional aspect is the sort that Khenpo has just described, so eloquently. But the ultimate bodhicitta is often associated with the wisdom traditions, and in particular with insight into the absence of any permanent self, emptiness as the nature of things. And many, of course, many people who practice Buddhism in the West now, or just being drawn to it, are fascinated by that aspect of Buddhism as well. The teachings on emptiness in particular are, I think, fascinating to people. And given that, what is the best way to maintain a balance in our own lives between concern for others, care for others, the elements of so-called relative bodhicitta, and this perspective through which we see that there is no enduring self, that things and ourselves are empty in some sense of that term? How do we balance those out?
I think, it is very important to use both compassion and wisdom together, because people have a certain degree of compassion in their relationships, but many times their compassion is not very genuine, or maybe they have a genuine compassion, but they don't have the wisdom to act properly. So therefore, sometimes they unintentionally hurt people, hurt others. So that is due to lack of wisdom. And on the other hand, some people are very intelligent and they're very, I think, very smart, but have no genuine compassion, then their action could be very dangerous, I think. So they can skillfully harm others for their own happiness. They know how to do that. And that is, I think, due to lack of wisdom, the compassion. So from the Buddhist point of view, compassion and wisdom both must need to develop together. Because once you have a genuine compassion, then how do I say, you have unmistaken motivation, whatever you do with other help or whatever you do. And you have unmistaken sort of motivation, you know, because then there's no selfishness, you know. And with genuine compassion, you also have a kind heart, right? And then everyone becomes your kind of friend, and you feel really good. You feel you're safe, and you feel relaxed and less paranoid. So, you know, all these good things will happen if you have a genuine compassion. At the same time, when you develop a wisdom, then you have unmistaken view and unmistaken sort of lifestyle. But if you don't have a clear view and you just believe in something, it could be very dangerous. That's why your wisdom makes these things, I think, clear. So wisdom needs to go with everything. For example, without wisdom, you're blind. Your faith will be kind of blind. Without wisdom, your love will be mixed with attachment. I call fish love in this book. So, you know, both, that's why wisdom emptiness is talking about that, right? Important for Buddhist practitioners. And both compassion and wisdom together, basically you can fly. You have two perfect wings, right? So according to Buddhist point of view, these two, compassion is part of bodhicitta, and then wisdom, those two you must develop together. Then, for example, we always say, like, when you study Buddhism, you have to investigate the teachers, investigate teachings before you start. So then you need that kind of wisdom. At the same time, only wisdom, no compassion, then your action could be very dangerous. So that's why it's very important.
Yeah. And having perhaps foolishly introduced the word emptiness, I should add that one needs to appreciate that within the Buddhist context, emptiness is not a nihilistic term. It does not deny the reality of anything in our conventional world. It's a very particular way of analyzing how we exist and how things exist, which is without some of the permanence and eternity and substantiality that we tend to attribute to things. My students at Carleton always got this intellectually really easily because they studied physics. It was a sort of similarity, but of course, to understand it intellectually is not the same as to appreciate it internally, contemplatively, sort of at a gut level, which actually brings me to the next question. One of the things that probably drew more people, perhaps in this audience, but broadly speaking, drew more people to Buddhism than anything else was the prospect of doing Buddhist meditation. And yet, in the context of the West, of course, there's this long history of social engagement, social and political action. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on, again, it's a question of balance. How do we balance a life that certainly places meditation at the heart of it in some ways, and yet also allows us to be engaged in whatever ways we choose with society, perhaps with politics, with trying to effect social change, those sorts of things. This has been a big debate among Western Buddhists. Is, you know, how do we keep these in balance?
I think there are two ways you can balance this. I think I'm not so sure. As you know, some practitioners are looking sort of longer term because they see that at this very moment they don't have a lot of capacity to help others. So first they need to develop their capacity before they can genuinely help others. So therefore they want to spend more time sort of in retreat and doing practice very diligently so that they can develop their capacity. And then once they have the capacity, they're ready to sort of help. That's one way. And the other one is, I think, those practitioners who want to help others at this very moment, no matter what their capacity is, because they think the life is short, fragile, and people really need help. So they would be more sort of engaged in their community and society or whatever, rather than longer term meditation retreat. I think both ways of helping others can be very good and beneficial, but I think it really depends on their motivation, their view and their capacity and all that. So I think it could be really good both ways to helping others, but it depends on especially their motivation and their capacity, I think. I hope that answers your question. I'm not so sure.
It's a huge question, but that's beautiful. Thank you. One of the most beautiful parts of this book comes at the very beginning when you describe the sort of life stories of the various teachers that you had in Tibet, and one of the themes that you've emphasized over the years that I've been studying, had the fortune to study with you, is the importance of lineage in Tibetan Buddhism. And I'm wondering if, because this is, in the West, we think about lineage mostly as being like family lineage.
Mm-hmm.
But of course here we're talking about a spiritual lineage. And I'm wondering if you could say something about why lineage, and particularly the notion of a pure lineage, is so important within Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, that's such a good question. I think the importance of lineage in Tibetan Buddhism is, all these great masters in the lineage, they can really experientially teach and guide a student their own realization through their practices. So they give teachings of realization and their experiential understanding rather than just transmitting on intellectual understanding. And that realization, that experiential understanding comes from the lineage. That is one important way that lineage is transmitted. Therefore, when you look for a teacher spiritual teacher, it is very Buddhist point of view. It's very important to examine them very carefully and to check if they come from an authentic lineage. That's why in Tibetan Buddhism, even if just written transmission, lineage considered very important. If you read, for example, lots of Dharma books and try to put them into your practice without any further sort of information, instruction from a qualified teacher from an authentic lineage, you would have no way to understand if you are practicing them correctly. And if you were to receive the lineage of teachings without any oral instructions, then you would be missing very important information about how to practice these teachings. That's why having an authentic lineage is very important. And it also helps you to develop trust and confidence in your practice. They are not teachings, popping up out of nowhere. You can really see a whole history of teacher to student, so on, of great practitioners. And then you have the ability to connect with that and enter into that stream. It's like, for example, if you want to buy a new, very expensive product, you would have much more confidence buying something that comes from history of making quality items over hundreds of years, right? You would not just want to buy something that came out of nowhere that you have never heard before. So your spiritual practice is so much more precious than an expensive product, So therefore, you want to make sure that you are really connecting to great and an authentic lineage with all these good qualities that you can see in all the great masters of the past. So therefore, the lineage, not just the lineage, but pure, you said, or authentic lineage, if you want to practice Buddhism, it's so important to find an authentic lineage and follow their instructions. That's the most, I think, important to understand. So that's why I think this question is so important. If you want to practice Buddhism, you just not read some books and then put it into your practice. That's not how you do it.
Right. And I think it's important to note that not just in Tibetan Buddhism, but in virtually all forms of Buddhism, lineage is absolutely vital. And one other thing that lineage does is it connects you with this historical stream of teachers and students that can always be traced back to some Buddha, to some enlightened being. And for that to be a pure lineage, then it not only has to have that pure source, but it has to be maintained and transmitted purely over many centuries, even millennia in some cases. So
this basically goes back to Buddha's teachings,
Yeah.
So no broken.
So when one talks about a lineage, one immediately thinks of teachers, of masters, of lamas, of gurus, call them what you will. And this has been sometimes a difficult matter for Westerners as they approach Buddhist traditions in general, but I think Tibetan Buddhism in particular. And I'm wondering if you could talk about both you already alluded to the fact that student and teacher need to sort of check each other out, but what the advantages and disadvantages of having a close relationship with a spiritual teacher are.
That is another one, very important to understand. I think that's what we call Guru devotion, right? Something like that, Guru devotion. Guru means teacher. Guru is Sanskrit term, but it means teacher. So understanding Guru devotion is very important, because this is also another very important, because lots of people have a misunderstanding about between teacher and student relationship. When you continue to receive teachings and study them with your examination, and then eventually you will understand that you need some kind of connection between yourself and teachings. So then you start to look for a spiritual instructor, and he or she gives you these oral instructions or teaching, whatever you call it. And if you follow their teachings and instructions, then slowly, over time, you will develop a genuine and strong connection with that teacher. Then your genuine devotion will come sort of naturally, without any, partial or force, because you will understand that teaching and instructions that you receive from this teacher, from your teacher, is very precious and very authentic. It could change your life. And then, if then you trust and you respect all these good connections to your teacher, sort of naturally come to in your mind. That's what we call genuine devotion. You just can't have a genuine devotion without all these foundations, your examinations and study about the teachings and all that. And then after that, this genuine devotion come to in your mind naturally, and then your trust and respect the teacher, and especially the instructions, kind of like very authentic and very precious. So that is what we call genuine devotion. Now, what does genuine devotion do? With that genuine devotion, you really appreciate and you really respect the lineage, and especially their instructions and teachings. And with that genuine devotion, you recognize that you are very fortunate. You realize that everything you have is very kind of precious. That makes your mind very strong, stable, and satisfied with everything. So more you understand that devotion, your practice becomes very authentic. You will experience the truth of the teachings, and that helps your practice. And with your practice, you will achieve your goal, whatever it is. So therefore, in order to receive an instructions requires that you have to respect, you have to trust in your teacher and the teachings. So again, you have to first investigate everything, and then once you have all these foundations, then this genuine devotion comes into your mind very naturally. I think that's how Western student should understand between this Guru devotion between student. I have reading about this teacher and student relationship in my book, because again, so many people have misunderstanding about teacher and student relationship. This spiritual, the teacher and student relationship is not like you have this experience in your school. This is my teacher, I'm a student. Not that kind of relationship, So therefore, I think it's really important, and I hope it will help people understand how to build and how to develop the student-teacher relationship if they want to receive teachings from teachers, and if they want to practice, then the relationship between student-teacher, this is very, very important.
Do I have time for one more? Okay. Mindful of time here, we're not going to get through all the questions, but that was inevitable. So you mentioned people having various goals, spiritually speaking, and of course for Buddhists, ultimately at least, the goal is enlightenment, and in a Tibetan Buddhist context, full Buddhahood. So what can enlightenment actually mean in a kind of skeptical, scientific culture like the one we live in, where people are, kind of looking a little bit suspiciously at some of the traditional claims about enlightenment? How should we think about enlightenment?
When you talk about enlightenment in Buddhism, it's nothing really other than when you realize the true nature of your mind. Buddha taught that there is no enlightenment outside. It's really about your own mind. So it's really nothing other than the total elimination of delusion. But I think in one way, the Buddhist path and enlightenment are aligned with a skeptical and scientific culture. Because Buddha himself told his student that they really need to investigate his teachings before they start to practice the teachings. And only after complete investigation should they be followed. And following the path will give you the proof of the teachings, because then then you will experience them, right? So then the entire path is process where you can directly experience the results of your practice. So in this way, I think it works very well with this modern culture and with highly skeptical people. But on the other hand, in science, they are focused on physical things, right? And there needs to be something physical and objective, right? But enlightenment is about your mind, as I said, and you have to experience it for yourself. So I think there is a gap here where this scientific culture is not really equipped to explore the mind. Although I heard that there are more studies about the mind these days. So who knows where that will all go in the future. But to summarize, I think people should use their own wisdom mind to study and especially investigate the Buddhist teachings to understand what is enlightenment. And I think that is the best way to understand what is enlightenment. And then through that study, especially meditation, you will understand what is enlightenment. Otherwise, just as Buddha himself said, enlightenment is not outside. It's about your mind. So that's what we call enlightenment.
Wonderful. I think we should open it up to questions from the audience at this point, if there are any. Kelly.
I'll ask one. I'm wondering what the place of vegetarianism is within Buddhism.
Oh. Vegetarianism. I think it's not strictly necessary, but vegetarianism has an important place within the life of a Buddhist practitioner because we are trying to develop love and kindness and try to refrain from harm others, right? So eating is something that you do multiple times a day. So you have great opportunities to relate it to other sentient beings with your love and compassion by choosing food that cause less harm. And also reflecting on the suffering that all these animals experience is an especially powerful practice that can help you to develop your love and compassion. And I think if you put yourself in their place, you will, I think naturally you will not want to cause them harm and suffering. So I think becoming vegetarian is a very easy way for you to powerfully do something good for others if you really want to help others. My teachers always say, if you really want to help others, first you should start with animals, help animals, being vegetarian and release animals, all that. And I think it's not only good for others, but it also is good for developing your compassion, developing your love, and it's really good for both, yourself and other beings. So I think becoming a vegetarian is, especially in this kind of country, you have so much different kinds of food that you can eat, not necessarily. Sometimes people say, I'm animal lover, and then you kill them, eat them. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's kind of contradictory. So if you are especially animal lover, then you should become a vegetarian, and there's no, it's not difficult, So I think, especially if you practice Buddhism, you're trying to develop love and compassion. That's the point. That's all about Buddhist teachings. So if you want to practice and develop love and compassion, then you should start to help animals and become a vegetarian. It's a great place to start it.
Other questions? Pam?
Khenpo, I was curious what you may have experienced as differences between your students in Tibet and students in Minnesota?
Oh, okay. Good for question. I think they are very different, to be honest with you, because their cultural background and education. So there are many differences, but I think the main difference between Tibetan students and Western students is in the West, I think almost all Westerns come to Buddhism after having received a good education, and after having also read some Buddhist books, so they already have a good foundation when they start to practice Buddhism. This is my own experience. I'm not sure. I'm not talking about all, but my own experience. I think Western students, they have a good education, and they read lots of Buddhist book and investigate, and then become a Buddhist, and they have already good foundation, and that helps them to understand Buddhist teachings and to make their mind very stable. And Tibetan students often don't have modern education as a foundation, but they grew up with old culture, traditional Tibetan Buddhism. So they already have a strong belief and faith in Buddhism. So they have a more, I think, direct sort of connection to Buddhism. And when they start to practice Buddhism, they are very stable on the path, Buddhist path. And also, Tibetan people, this student, they grew up believing in future life and rebirth or cause and karma and all that. But I'm not so sure how strong Westerners believe in those kind of things. So with these huge culture differences between them, I think it makes them very, very different. It's very different. But one thing I can tell you that both share a common interest in the teachings of Buddhism, and they both want to develop personal and spiritual growth. I think that's a common goal for both group of students, the Tibetan and Western student. That's the point. I think in that area, they share everything, because you have to practice and grow your personal and develop your human capacity, and especially thinking about enlightenment and all that. So that is common goal. But otherwise, everything, Tibetan student, Western student, I think the way they think, the way they believes in everything, I think very, very different.
Time for one more, perhaps?
One or two?
One or two, yeah.
I have a question, Khenpo. The term, compassion fatigue has increased or is being talked about a lot more now, especially in Western culture, coming out of the pandemic in the last few years. And in your talk about compassion and wisdom, can you please share some of your insights of how you interpret the term that Westerners use as compassion fatigue, and where that term could be, I want to say, could be misleading? Do you understand that question?
You understand the term?
Yeah, I think so. Compassion, as I said, very often people misunderstand about compassion. I always talk about these things, because as I said, lots of people say I am a very compassionate person, but sometimes they really don't I don't know, maybe I can't say don't understand, but maybe misunderstand what is compassion, like genuine compassion. According to the Buddhist point of view, the genuine compassion is not mixed with sort of attachment and desire and all that. So, for your question, the compassion that I'm talking here with the wisdom and compassion you have to develop together. So that helps if you misunderstand about compassion and love, and then if you have wisdom beside the compassion, if you develop a wisdom, then you have no mistaking the view, and then you will understand sort of the meaning of genuine compassion correctly, because the wisdom helps to clear these things, Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, especially, since the pandemic happened, it's really difficult. People keep their genuine compassion in their mind. And because we are kind of like out of society and community, because the pandemic, it makes people very lonely, and it's very difficult, and paranoia, like all like that. But good thing is now almost done, pandemic. So I think maybe not done yet, but I don't know. So anyway, it's very common. People misunderstanding compassion and love. They think they have love and genuine love and compassion, but according to Buddhist teachings, the characteristic of the compassion and love is not really mixed with attachment and desire and all that. So that's, I think, very important to understand, but not just to understand. You have to really practice and meditate on it. Otherwise, just everything in intellectual understanding, and that leads you nothing. All right.
One more, if there is?
If there is one more, we have time.
Yep. Okay, Kate?
So, Khenpo, you said that maybe part 2 of the book is not what Westerners are going to dive into, but we all will die, and you said that it will come. So could you give us a very brief teaching on how to prepare to die?
It depends.
Last question.
Yeah, it's important to understand and prepare, right? Prepare for, sometimes people, especially in the West, they don't believe in rebirth and reincarnation and future life, and it's okay, it's fine, but they believe like when you die, that's the end of everything, and you're just, everything is finished, everything's done, nothing more, right? So if you believe that, that's fine, as long as you are a good person, you are compassionate and you are a loving person, then, or especially like some also Buddhist practitioners, they don't believe in rebirth, in reincarnations, all of that. But as long as you are serious and good sort of Buddhist practitioner, then it's okay whether you don't believe in reincarnation or the rebirth or not, if you're a good practitioner. But I think the preparing for death is actually those people who believe in rebirth and next life, which is really good, because if you don't believe this life is gone, then that's it, then your motivation is very limited. So then you're just done. Whatever you done this life, that's it. But if you believe in sort of in rebirth, in reincarnation, then your motivation is like, then after you die, you have more opportunities, more time. For example, if you create a good foundation in this life, as we talk about the bodhicitta, for example, if you practice bodhicitta and you create that foundation this life, but still you don't have a lot of capacity to help others, then it's okay. Then you think, okay, I will come back, and then I have already created a good foundation, and on top of that, next life I be able to, maybe I have more capacity to help others, and especially we're talking about the enlightenment, achieving enlightenment in this life, the very lifetime, it's almost impossible, because you have to eliminate all these negative emotions and thoughts, and that takes time. So if you believe in rebirth, then enlightenment is possible another lifetime. So therefore you have to prepare for death, because if you don't believe in rebirth and reincarnation, you don't have to prepare. You know, it just this life you are famous, you are rich, you have everything, then you're done. That's it. But if you believe in rebirth, then you have to prepare. And the preparation, of course, there are lots of meditation, rituals, and all these kind of things. Then we are going to, usually I don't consider Buddhism is a religion, is a mind training. It's kind of, but then when we talk about preparing for death, then all this ritual and practice, like, visualizations, all this, it's very complicated, but then there are a very easy way to also prepare for your death and for your next rebirth and reincarnation. So in order to understand all of that, it's just we can't talk today here, but you have to create a good foundation, and then also you have to invest. Lots of people just, some people believe in rebirth without good reasons. Some people don't believe in reincarnation, rebirth, without any reason. They just, my consciousness is here. When I die, this died. So then everything's in, right? So it's kind of very complicated topic, and it's difficult. But as I said, it doesn't matter if you are a good person, good human being. Then whether you believe in rebirth and reincarnation or not, I think it's okay as long as you are good people. That's the point, right?
All right, thank you both so much. We'll go sign books over at the counter in just a moment.